Okay, everyone. So today we're going to start by talking about absolute value, and we're going to talk about how you get no solution with absolute value. So we have this absolute value sign right here, and it says the absolute value of 2x minus 3 is equal to negative 1. So if we look at that, we're trying to say, okay, well, the absolute value inside of there, the 2x minus 3, that could be a positive value, or inside of the absolute value, the 2x minus 3 could be a negative value. And if we think about it, well, the absolute value of x is going to be x, and the absolute value of negative x is also going to be an x. So no matter whether the inside is positive or the inside of the absolute value is negative, it's always going to produce a positive absolute value right there. So if we take this equation, which is the absolute value of 2x minus 3 equals negative 1, and we make two separate equations for it where one of the absolute values would be equal to the positive. So we'd say, well, 2x minus 3 would be equal to negative 1, and our other equation would be negative 2x minus 3. So the inside of it would be a negative, would also be equal to negative 1. So if you look at that, well, absolute value, wait a second, could never ever be negative. Absolute value should always be a positive solution. So therefore, it doesn't matter what the inside is, this is not possible. So our answer would be no solution here. Okay, so the next one that we're going to talk about is extraneous solutions. And extraneous solutions are solutions where the absolute value actually does work out. We can do all the math work, we can get a final solution to the equation, but then when you take your final answer and you plug it back into your original equation, the sentence is not true. It's like this little extra solution that doesn't really work out. So it's considered extraneous. It's not that there's no solution, which we just talked about. No solution means like it's not even possible to solve at all. This is solvable. This gives you an answer. But when you take your answer and plug it back in, it doesn't work out mathematically. So it's this extra solution that's not possible. So all absolute value equations, once you get your answers, which are put in a solution set within brackets, you actually have to go back and check them. So you know how your teacher's always saying, check your work? If you don't check your work with absolute value, you could end up with an extraneous solution, which is actually not a viable solution. So you would make your answer incorrect. You must check your work by plugging everything back in. So let's start with the equation. The absolute value of 3x equals 6x plus 3. So we're going to take that, okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to make our two separate equations. So remember, absolute value is whatever's inside the absolute value is equal to a positive, or whatever's inside absolute value is equal to a negative. So I'm going to take this equation and I'm going to say, well, I'm going to make my two different equations, okay? And so I'm going to say my first equation is going to be what's inside absolute value is equal to the positive version, which is 6x plus 3. And then my second equation, I'm going to say my absolute value is equal to negative 6x plus 3. Okay, so my absolute value is equal to the positive value, and then my absolute value is equal to the negative value. You'll see sometimes they set them up differently. You could say a different way of writing this would be 3x equals 6x plus 3, which is the positive, and then negative 3x, and so make the inside of the absolute value negative and say negative 3x is equal to 6x plus 3. But either way, you'll end up with the same solution. So we're going to go ahead and solve each of these. So my first equation over here, which is 3x is equal to 6x plus 3, that's the positive. So we're going to combine like terms by subtracting 6x, and whatever I do to one side, I do to the other, this would cancel, and 3x minus 6x is negative 3x equals 3. Okay, and then what we're going to do is keep continuing to solve because this is a negative 3 as my coefficient in front of my variable x, the operation holding the negative 3 coefficient to the x's multiplication, therefore we need division. So I would divide by negative 3. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other, and I end up with x equals 3 divided by negative 3 is negative 1. Okay, so now I know my answer is negative 1. So we're going to take that answer and plug it back into my original equation to see if it's true. So if I have the absolute value of 3 times negative 1, so I'm replacing that x with negative 1, equals 6 times negative 1 instead of my x plus 3. And we're going to solve this. So 6 times negative 1 is negative 6 plus 3 is equal to negative 3. And then this side would be the absolute value of 3 times negative 1 is negative 3, and the absolute value of negative 3 is positive 3. So this does not actually work out, and it is not equal. So negative 1, although it is a wonderful solution and it looks great, like it all worked out, it's considered extraneous. Okay, and it is not considered a part of the solution set to this problem. So our next problem is the negative version. So we're going to take this and we're going to solve. So the first thing I would do is there's an invisible negative 1 here, and I'm going to distribute that negative to both terms since we are saying the absolute value is equal to the negative version of 6x plus 3. So we have 3x equals negative 6x minus 3 once the negative is distributed. Now we're going to add 6x to both sides to combine like terms. And I would end up with 9x equals a negative 3. And then I'm going to take that and I'm going to say, okay, well, 9x equals negative 3. I'm going to divide by 9 to both sides. And then x equals negative 1/3 when you simplify 3 over 9. So now we're going to take that and we're going to plug it back into my original equation to see if negative 1/3 is an actual solution. So if I take the absolute value of 3 and multiply it by negative 1/3, and then I'm going to set that equal to 6 times negative 1/3 plus 3. So here we go, we're going to solve. So let's do the left side first. We have 3 times negative 1/3, so 3 times a third is 1. So that would be an absolute value of negative 1, and the absolute value of negative 1 is just positive 1. Now we're going to do the other side. So 6 times a third. So 6 times a third is 2. So we have negative 2 plus 3, and negative 2 plus 3 is positive 1. So my answer to this is 1 equals 1. So my only solution to this problem is x equals a set of answers, which is 1. And so again, the brackets mean a set. So there is no other numbers in that set that would work. This is the only possible solution to plugging it in. So I'm sorry, it's negative 1/3 in my set of solutions. It's my value of x right here, not what I solved my answer to be. So my solution set is negative 1/3, and that would be the final answer. Okay, so we have one extraneous solution and one that actually works. Make sure you check your work. Plug in your answers.